threw her into the river to perish, but an amazing rancher defied fate in a surprising twist. Clara stood at the edge of her land, the sun glimmering on the river that wound through her ranch like a fragile hope. She dug her fingers deep into the dirt, feeling the cool earth beneath her nails, grounding herself in the midst of a storm brewing not just in the skies but within her spirit. Every whisper of the wind seemed to carry Mrs. Wellington's venomous words, accusing her of incompetence, of ruining the family legacy her mother had fought so hard to protect. The ranch was all she had left, and now it felt like it was slipping through her fingers. "Fight for what's yours," her mother had always said. But as Clara looked down the expanse of her fields, her resolve wavered. She felt the weight of expectations pressing down on her, her father retreating further into the bottle, the ranch in tatters, the world hardened against her. What could one young woman do against a powerful foe who painted her as the villain? She recalled her mother's laughter, full of life and wisdom, echoing against the backdrop of the Golden Hills. Every lesson felt like a lifeline now, each one no more than a fragile memory. Fear gnawed at her insides. What if she failed completely, not just the ranch, but the memory of her mother? Each day, she watched the cattle graze, wondering how many were left that could be salvaged. The thought of them dwindling made her stomach churn. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The evening air was thick with hesitance the day Jake showed up at her doorstep, rugged and weathered, his warmth invading the cold isolation that wrapped around her like a shroud. Their partnership blossomed as they worked together, their laughter intermingling with the cries of the cattle, and for the first time in a long time, Clara felt the tendrils of hope reach out to her. But she could feel the shadows of Mrs. Wellington lurking, always ready to pounce, her influence blackening the town's heart against Clara. When the cattle stock began to dwindle mysteriously, Clara's blood ran cold. The fear of being confronted again by Mrs. Wellington gripped her. Standing in the abyss of despair, she realized the confrontation was inevitable. It was only a matter of time. Then, it happened. A vicious altercation where words turned like daggers, only to have Mrs. Wellington's hands shove her hard, throwing Clara into the river. The shock of freezing water jolted her, lungs gasping for air as her body sank beneath the surface. As the icy tendrils wrapped around her, panic surged. Just as hopelessness began to consume her, a familiar figure plunged into the depths, Jake's powerful arms pulling her back to safety. Clara gasped as her head broke through the surface, breathless and trembling, both with fear and the realization of a deeper fight ahead. Yet with every beat of her heart, anger surged within her. This was more than just survival. It was about reclaiming her mother's legacy, uncovering the truths buried within her family's history that Mrs. Wellington had tried to erase. With Jake at her side, all the pieces of the past began aligning, promising a confrontation unlike any before. Clara stood there, soaked, panting and emboldened. It was time to break the silence, ignite the truth, and unveil the bitter secrets holding her back. But as the winds began to howl and the shadows of doubt crept closer, Clara's heart raced with uncertainty. Would she have the strength to face the storm brewing ahead? Or would everything she fought for be washed away, forever lost? Clara stood at the riverbank, dripping and shivering, but with the fire of determination igniting inside her. The frozen water had jolted her, awakening a fierce resolve that coursed through her veins. No longer would she be the passive character in this tale shaped by Mrs. Wellington's venomous hand. She had emerged from the depths, not merely surviving but ready to confront the chaos that history and circumstance had pinned her under. "Jake," she managed, her voice still shaken, "I can't let this go on." His brow furrowed, concern etching lines across his rugged features as he stepped closer, peering into her eyes as if gauging the depth of her resolve. "You know what you're up against, Clara. This isn't just about the ranch anymore. It's about reputation, money, and the people who believe her. They will turn against you." Clara nodded, the bitter truth sinking in, but she couldn't allow doubt to poison her spirit. She had spent too long buried under the weight of the past, shackled by fear and the seemingly insurmountable challenge before her. The old Clara might have faltered, but this new woman, soaked and shaking yet invigorated, recognized her own power in the swirling waters of adversity. "I need to dig deeper into our history," she said, her mind racing. "The past holds the keys to overcoming this. Mom's documents. There might be something she hid, something that could help us fight back." Jake's expression shifted from worry to a flicker of respect as he realized her commitment. Together they would have to sift through the remnants of Clara's mother's life. That meant late nights, poring over letters, journals, and anything else that offered clues. As Clara wrestled with the tasks ahead, a potent realization struck her. She was no longer tethered to the fear that had plagued her since her mother's death. Instead, she had the ability to shape her own narrative. The next days were a blur of activity. Under the pale moonlight, the two teamed up as partners, pushing their physical and emotional limits. Clara unearthed her mother's journals from a dusty box in the attic, each turn of the aged pages revealing nuggets of wisdom interlaced with her mother's struggles, an echo of their silent battle. It became clear there were puzzles to solve, secrets wrapped in metaphors and poignant recollections, a history laden with resilience. As Clara deciphered her mother's hidden messages, revelations sparked within her mind, illuminating truths she had been too close to grasp before. The numbers she discovered painted a different picture of the ranch's finances. It wasn't merely a struggling entity, but a profitable venture, distorted by lies and manipulation. This knowledge was empowering, but it also carried weight. Her mother had shielded this information for reasons yet unknown. One evening, as the shadows lingered long into the night, Clara felt the burden of her discoveries pressing down on her with intense urgency. Jake, what if her work had a purpose beyond just saving the ranch? What if it was about protecting something or someone? We need to figure out who might have been involved with Mrs. Wellington back then. This is about more than us now. This could expose the very foundation of her influence. Jake agreed, and they devised a plan to reconnect with the town's memories, digging into old news articles, reaching out to elders who might recall the days when Clara's mother reigned as a formidable figure in the community. Each day grew both heavier and lighter at once. She was unearthing a truth that could either liberate her legacy or shatter everything she thought she knew. In the dim light of their makeshift office, Clara felt a shift within her, a transforming courage blooming. Every hesitation she had entertained began to dissolve, replaced by a fierce commitment to reclaim what was rightfully hers. The confrontation with Mrs. Wellington grew imminent, with every turn of the page fostering a steely resolve within her spirit. That resolve soon solidified into a plan of action. Clara would confront Mrs. Wellington, not only to reclaim her family's legacy, but to reclaim her identity in the eyes of this fractured community. She would wield not just her mother's truths, but her own emerging strength. But as Clara prepared for what was to come, a chilling thought crept into her mind. Was she ready to bear the secrets that had remained hidden for so long, or would unearthing them lead to consequences beyond her control? The time had come to face a reckoning, and as the sun set behind the hills, Clara stood at the threshold of her destiny, the shadows swelling around her once again. But this time, she would step into the light. Clara awoke to the creaking of the old house as dawn broke, casting golden rays through the dusty window panes. The sun's warmth felt foreign yet welcoming, instilling in her the energy needed for a day she had been waiting for. Glancing at the scattered papers on the table, her mother's journals intermingled with articles about the ranch and Mrs. Wellington, she felt a surge of clarity. Today was the day. "Are you ready?" Jake's voice broke through her thoughts, cutting through her moment of quiet introspection. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a challenge in his tone that matched the intensity of her own anticipation. Clara took a deep breath, carefully collecting herself. She had envisioned this moment countless times, a dialogue that would bind past grievances with her newfound strength. "I am," she replied, her voice steady. The journey to town felt like a pilgrimage, each mile a reminder of everything that had brought her to this juncture. Clara's mind spun as she contemplated her next steps. She needed to pinpoint the people whose voices and memories had the potential to either bind or break her. Perhaps she could extract insights she hadn't considered before, unspoken connections and alliances that had long been hidden from her. When they reached the small town square, its familiarity felt like a double-edged sword. Clara's heart raced as she surveyed the storefronts that lined Main Street. They held the ghosts of her childhood, but also the weight of her mother's legacy. The sun illuminated the faded paint on the buildings, each splintered board reflecting her mixed emotions. "Let's start at the diner," Jake suggested, nodding toward the local hub. "People will talk there if we ask the right questions." As they entered the diner, the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the comforting aroma of breakfast. Clara scanned the room, searching for familiar faces. Seated in a booth against the wall was Mary, a woman whose laughter had once been a melody in Clara's youth. Gathering her courage, Clara approached. "Mary, is it still you?" Clara offered a tentative smile. "Clara, my word, look at you!" Mary exclaimed, her cheeks dimpling with genuine warmth. "What brings you back here?" Clara sensed the interest from the other patrons, ears pricked with intrigue. "I'm digging into my mother's past, looking for answers, people's stories about her and about Mrs. Wellington." As she spoke, Clara felt the air shift, a tension enveloping them like the heat from the griddle. Mary's cheerful expression faltered, the light in her eyes dimming. "You want to talk about her, huh? That's a dangerous game you're playing, dear." Clara's heart pounded. This was precisely what she had to confront. "Why? What did my mother know?" Jake, sensing the depth of the conversation, positioned himself close, ready to interject if needed. "Your mother was respected, Clara," Mary began hesitantly, her gaze darting away. "But she had enemies. Mrs. Wellington? She was cunning. It's not just business. She saw your mother as a threat." Questions tumbled in Clara's mind, colliding against the known history she'd been fed. Threat? Or a potential rival? Mary reached out, her fingers brushing Clara's forearm. "Let me tell you something, child. Your mother had something they wanted, a power that could shake the ground here, and you, like her, must tread carefully." The implications of Mary's words sizzled in the air, sparking both fear and determination within Clara. With each answer she unearthed, the path before her appeared more perilous, yet layered with promise. As they left the diner, Clara's thoughts buzzed with the overwhelming truth that she was not merely following in her mother's footsteps, but forging her own path. The pieces of their story were connected in ways she had yet to fully understand, and the shadows of the past were beginning to lift, even as new questions loomed larger. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, studying her face. "I'm just getting started," Clara replied, a steely resolve taking root within her. The confrontation with Mrs. Wellington felt closer than ever, not just as a battle to reclaim her mother's legacy, but a quest for her own identity tied intricately to the truth she was ready to expose. As they walked, Clara's thoughts spiraled toward who else might hold the key, who else might comprehend the depths of her mother's influence. The urgency thrummed in her veins. Tomorrow, they would visit the old archives at the town hall and sift through records. Today's fragments of conversation would propel her forward. But within the thrill of discovery, a whisper of doubt lingered. Clara couldn't shake the sensation that there were secrets, threaded in the fabric of her mother's past, that even she wasn't ready to face. An undeniable chill ran down her spine as she followed Jake into the sunlight, unsure of what awaited them in the archives. Would knowledge be their ally, or would it unearth burdens that were better left in the shadows? Clara awoke the next morning with an unsettling blend of anticipation and anxiety. The air felt thick, almost electric, and as she sipped her coffee at the kitchen table, she replayed the previous day's revelations in her mind. Mrs. Wellington's serpent-like hold over the town gnawed at her consciousness. She had to confront it. She had to peel back the layers of deception and fear that suffocated her mother's legacy. "Get ready. We've got a lot of ground to cover today," Jake announced as he entered the room, his presence a pillar of encouragement. Clara nodded, determination flooding her veins. This wasn't merely about seeking answers anymore. It was about justice for her mother and confirming her own place in this complicated narrative. As they drove to the town hall, Clara contemplated the archives. She imagined the weight of history within the dusty boxes, yet beneath her eagerness lurked doubt. Would she be able to decode the secrets of the past? What if the truths uncovered were too much to bear? "You all right?" Jake asked, concern etching his brow. "Just thinking," Clara replied, the firmness of her voice belying the whirlwind inside her. She knew this journey was more than gathering facts. It was a test of her resilience and intellect. The town hall loomed as they arrived, its weathered stone facade seeming to absorb the sunlight. Entering, Clara felt the cool air wash over her, refreshing yet incongruous. The librarian, an elderly woman with sharp glasses perched precariously on her nose, watched them closely as they approached. "We need access to historical records, particularly anything on the Wellington estate and my mother, Clara Bennett," she stated, her voice steady despite the flutters in her stomach. The librarian's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's a sensitive subject, dear. Are you sure you want to go down that path?" Clara's heart raced at the warning yet compelled her to push further. "Yes, I need the truth." Once in the archives, Clara and Jake began to sift through files. She felt the thrill of the unknown, combing through page after page, scanning the entries for a clue or whisper of her mother's past. Names and dates blurred together, but the deeper she delved, the stronger she felt, a sense of connection binding her to her mother's life. "Look at this," Jake called, his voice slicing through the quiet. Clara rushed to his side, attention sharpened. He pointed to a newspaper clipping dated years ago. It featured a photo of her mother speaking before a town meeting, her demeanor strong and resolved. The caption read, "Bennett calls for community reform against corruption." The realization crashed into Clara. Her mother was a force to reckon with, but who had turned on her? Clara's gut tightened as she turned the page. She found a handwritten letter in another box, her mother's flowing script. "Trust no one," it began. The words echoed ominously, revealing layers of foreboding caution, a plea perhaps. "There's more here than I anticipated," Clara murmured, the gravity of the words seeping into her understanding. Each piece of paper transformed into a fragment of her mother's legacy, weighed down by intimidation and unsung battles. But just as resolve bubbled within her, a note fell from a folder, revealing an address, Mrs. Wellington's estate. Clara's heart kicked into overdrive. This was the connection she needed. She had to confront her mother's history head-on, face the manipulator who had pervaded their lives. "I have to go there," she declared, excitement mingling with fear. Jake shifted, conflicted. "Clara, just be careful. That place isn't just a house. It's a fortress of power and secrets." "Exactly, but I can't turn back now." She felt an urgency not just to reclaim her mother's story, but to unearth the strength that could stem from it. The time had come for her to disrupt the cycle of fear. As they packed up their findings, the weight of her mother's truth pressing into her, Clara couldn't help but feel a growing confidence. She was no longer just her mother's daughter. She was becoming her own force, ready to break the chains of the past. Walking out of the town hall with Jake by her side, Clara saw the possibilities stretching before her. But she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling within. Would she emerge victorious, or would she end up ensnared by the very shadows she sought to escape? Tomorrow, confrontation awaited, and with each step closer to Mrs. Wellington's door, Clara braced herself for the ultimate reckoning. Would she walk away with the truth, or had fate already intertwined her path with danger? Clara stood at the edge of Mrs. Wellington's estate, an imposing structure that loomed like a spectre of dread. The afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows that mirrored her internal turmoil. Each step toward the entrance felt both exhilarating and perilous, a test of the conviction that had burned through the uncertainty of the previous days. With Jake behind her, she took a deep breath, mentally bulletproofing herself against the intimidation that threatened to seep in. She recalled her mother's determined stance, the resolute expression captured in the newspaper photograph. That woman had refused to be silenced, and Clara would honor her legacy. As they approached the door, Clara noticed the detailed craftsmanship of the woodwork, the intricate carvings whispering tales of wealth and power. This facade was carefully designed to maintain an illusion, an impenetrable wall of privilege harboring secrets that knotted her stomach. Jake hesitated, his expression reflecting concern. "Clara, maybe this was a mistake. We could—" "No, we can't back down now," she interrupted, her voice firmer than she felt. With a swift motion, she knocked on the door, a sound that reverberated through the air like a call to arms. Moments later, the door opened, revealing Mrs. Wellington herself, her steel-gray hair framing a face adorned with a scrutinizing gaze. "You have some nerve to come here, Clara," she remarked, her tone a mix of incredulity and amusement. "I'm here for the truth," Clara said, summoning every shred of courage. "The truth about my mother and what happened in this town." Mrs. Wellington's eyes narrowed, lips curving into a cold, dismissive smile. Ah, the noble quest for justice. But do consider, truth can be treacherous, especially for those unprepared to hear it. Clara's heart raced, but the warning only fueled her resolve. I'm prepared, she insisted, stepping forward as Jake remained a pace behind, a stabilizing presence even as doubt flickered in his eyes. The inside of the estate was nothing short of opulent, but the lavish decor felt suffocating, an environment crafted to impress and intimidate. Clara could almost feel the weight of history pressing down, a reminder of the lives intertwined with her mother's legacy. Why did you turn against her? Clara demanded, unable to contain the ire that bubbled to the surface. She stood against your corruption. What scared you so much that you needed to silence her? Mrs. Wellington stepped closer, the smile vanishing, replaced by an icy stare that pierced straight through Clara. You think you know the whole story, child? Her voice dripped with condescension. You're a child playing grown-up. Your mother was more than just a victim. She made choices that affected the entire community, choices driven by her own ambitions. Each word twisted like a dagger. Clara's breath quickened as she pushed back against the emotional tide threatening to engulf her. She was fighting for us, for the truth. Don't twist her legacy into something sinister. Legacy, Mrs. Wellington repeated, drawing out each syllable mockingly. What you perceive as courage was just a facade, much like the stories you tell yourself. The world is not as simple as good versus evil. There are shades of gray, Clara, and your mother failed to navigate them. Clara's thoughts raced, wrestling with the implications of Mrs. Wellington's revelation. Had her mother truly been driven by personal motives? It was maddening to consider. The memories floated just out of reach, tainted now by the doubt planted in her mind. But that doesn't justify silencing her, Clara shot back, feeling adrenaline surge through her. The stakes were higher than she had comprehended. Exposing the lies meant stepping into uncharted territory, challenging the narrative woven around her mother's life. Just as it seemed the confrontation would spiral out of control, Mrs. Wellington's expression shifted. You want answers, then? She asked, her voice smooth as silk, concealing the sharp edge beneath. Very well. If you're truly willing to dig, I can show you. But be warned, Clara, some truths are far more horrifying than you can imagine. Clara held her ground, her determination hardening into a powerful force. I'll take that risk. As she followed Mrs. Wellington deeper into the estate, the taut tension hung in the air, thickening with each step. What revelations awaited her in the shadows of this fortress? Clara's heart pounded as she pondered whether she was prepared to confront a reality deeper and darker than she anticipated. With each step closer, she felt her own identity crystallize. This was no longer just about her mother's story. It was about forging her own, navigating the treacherous waters of her family's intertwined legacy. What lay ahead could shatter everything she believed or solidify the resolve she was building. The truth, Clara thought, was always closer than it appeared. If only she dared to confront it. Would she emerge understanding the legacy her mother had left her, or merely tethered to the pain woven through its fabric? The answer awaited her in the depths of the estate, and she had no intention of turning back now. As Clara followed Mrs. Wellington through the dimly lit corridors of the estate, she felt an unease creep up her spine. The walls, adorned with portraits reminiscent of a bygone era, seemed to whisper secrets, secrets she was determined to uncover. Each painting appeared to observe her, their subjects bound to the reality she was about to confront. Come along, Mrs. Wellington beckoned, her voice laced with an unsettling calm that made Clara reluctant yet curious. The old woman led her to a study filled with the scent of aged wood and polished leather. A grand desk dominated the room, its surface littered with papers and old documents that hinted at a dark legacy. Clara's eyes were drawn to an old photograph, one of her mother, smile bright yet secretive. Was it possible her mother had been aware of more than anyone could ever know? She picked it up gently, her fingers brushing against the surface as if it could provide answers. Your mother was ambitious, Clara, Mrs. Wellington said abruptly, watching her with a predatory intensity. Her ambition outgrew her understanding of the consequences. She believed herself to be a champion of truth, yet she manipulated those around her to achieve it. Anger flared within Clara at Mrs. Wellington's words, but she forced herself to remain calm. Saying she was manipulative doesn't absolve you, she countered, her voice steady. Is that really what you want the world to believe? Mrs. Wellington smiled, but it was a smile sharp as a blade. And what do you wish to believe? That she was merely a victim in a grand tale of good versus evil? Life's narratives are far more complex than that. Clara's thoughts spiraled, battling against the seeds of doubt Mrs. Wellington attempted to plant. How could she uncover the truth when the very foundation of her beliefs was under siege? The anger that surged within her also possessed an undercurrent of fear. Was her mother's fight one motivated by a desire to change the world, or by a need to align everyone with her own vision? The lines blurred painfully. Show me then, Clara challenged, the fire in her voice deceptive against the vulnerability in her heart. Show me the truth behind what happened. I don't fear it, Mrs. Wellington. Fear has a way of unveiling truths, Clara, Mrs. Wellington replied, stepping back to allow Clara closer to the desk. You'll find that it is more revealing than courage. Identifying a stack of files, Clara reached for them. Page after page was filled with documents, email exchanges, and testimonies that painted a picture she wasn't prepared for. But she needed to know. As she flipped through the papers, it became evident that her mother had been communicating with several individuals who had motives that extended far beyond the simple desire for truth. Clara's stomach twisted. Your mother was playing a dangerous game, Mrs. Wellington stated, almost coaxingly. The enemies she made were not just behind closed doors, they were in plain sight, veiled by smiles and pleasantries. Clara's breath came quicker, the gravity of the implications soaking in. What do you mean? Who were these enemies? But Clara, Mrs. Wellington interrupted smoothly, the past is not something to be taken lightly. Your mother was caught in a web, and she willingly wove it herself. Intrigued and terrified, Clara's resolve tempered her vulnerability, realizing that her stepping into this realm meant the potential unearthing of truths she might not be prepared to accept. You want to know who your mother truly was? Then brace yourself. Understanding can be as confronting as it is liberating. With those words, Mrs. Wellington slid a file towards her, a knowing look in her eyes that suggested Clara was on the precipice of an irretrievable plunge. Curiosity mingled with anxiety, and now she could sense the looming shadows deepening around her. Clara took a deep breath, aware that the next moments could redefine her past and, more importantly, her future. She could feel the weight of her mother's decisions pressing against her. What was hidden within those pages? In that moment, confronting the truth felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to dive into the unknown. Would the waters below embrace her with understanding, or would she drown in the despair of revelations yet to come? As she lifted the file, a chilling sense of determination surged through her veins. The time had come to face the real legacy her mother left behind, and it would change everything. Would she emerge victorious, or would this journey lead her to irrevocable consequences? Clara's heart thudded, each beat reverberating with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. The weight of the file felt tangible in her hands, its potential to rewrite her narrative almost suffocating. She carefully opened it, the papers rustling under her touch as they revealed the undercurrents of her mother's past, correspondences that hinted at alliances and betrayals. The first document was a timeline of events marked by key dates and names that ignited a flicker of recognition. Clara's mind raced as she pieced together scattered fragments of conversations she'd overheard as a child. Names her mother had mentioned in passing suddenly morphed into figures encased in shadows, each representing a potential threat to the vision her mother sought to uphold. "What are you thinking, Clara?" Mrs. Wellington's voice cut through the haze, a thin layer of amusement tracing her tone. "Are you beginning to understand the magnitude of those involved?" Clara's gaze darted to Mrs. Wellington, whose expression betrayed nothing but a calm detachment. "I'm starting to see that the truth is far more convoluted than I imagined." Clara's words were steady, a deliberate attempt to reclaim some agency in this unnerving exchange. "Good. To seek out complexity is to embrace reality." Mrs. Wellington leaned against the desk, arms crossed, allowing Clara space but lingering just enough to remind her that she was not alone in this dissection of past demons. As Clara scanned through the emails, her stomach churned uneasily. There were coded messages that hinted at covert meetings, exchanges that suggested her mother was not merely a participant in the fight for truth, she was an architect of conflict. Anguish bubbled within Clara, and she questioned everything she thought she knew about her mother. Had she really been the beacon of righteousness Clara had idolized, or was she merely a project manager of chaos? "Tell me more about these enemies," Clara pressed, her pulse quickening. Who were they, and how far did her manipulation extend? Mrs. Wellington tilted her head, a curious smile curling at the edges of her lips. "Ah, there lies the essence of her ambition. Sometimes, even those we see as allies can be our greatest adversaries." Clara nodded, her thoughts racing, recognizing that she was grappling not only with her mother's actions, but with her own inherited predispositions fueled her desire to understand better. What did it mean to fear fear itself? How could she balance ambition with integrity? The philosophical weight of those questions loomed larger with each passing moment. "Everything has consequences," Mrs. Wellington added, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Especially when you weave a web thick with deception. Your mother entangled herself, but neglected to see where the strands would fray." With a deep breath, Clara adjusted her posture in an effort to gather her thoughts. She needed this reclamation of her mother's legacy, not merely for closure, but so she could learn how to navigate her own life. "It's not just about discovering the past, it's about reshaping my future." Mrs. Wellington's brows raised in acknowledgement, perhaps even respect. "Indeed, recognizing who you truly are is the first step. The legacy of ambition can be a heavy cloak, Clara. One must learn how to wear it without losing one's essence." Motivated by that sentiment, Clara began to diligently sift through the pages, setting aside fragments that were particularly intriguing or disturbing. Each piece of information revealed pressures her mother had faced. Every letter was steeped in desperation and relentless pursuit of a cause. "Maybe I'll uncover strengths I didn't know I had," Clara muttered quietly, a spark of determination igniting within her. "And maybe," Mrs. Wellington countered softly, "you will bear witness to haunting reflections of yourself you may wish to ignore." Clara's resolve magnified, sharpening her purpose. It was time to confront her own vulnerabilities, to rewrite her relationship with her mother's legacy. The mental and emotional toll weighed heavily, yet Clara felt invigorated by the challenge ahead. She was prepared to step into the murky waters of her family's history, ready to swim against the current of expectations that had once threatened to drown her. As she delved deeper into the contents of the file, a name jumped from the page, a familiar name that rooted her in place. Recognition washed over her. This would unravel the connection she never anticipated. What were the ties leading to this figure, and how did they weave into her narrative? The true challenge loomed, a confrontation with someone who held unimaginable power over the tale of her origins. Clara was on a precipice, seconds away from taking another leap into the unknown, her heart racing at the uncharted territory that lay before her. With every question she unearthed, her path became clearer, but so did the danger that accompanied it. Clara took a deep breath, ready to confront the echoes of her mother's actions, ready to reclaim her future, one revelation at a time. What awaited her behind that name would test her beyond anything she had prepared for, leading her deeper into the conflict entwining her identity and her mother's true legacy. Clara's fingers trembled as they traced the name on the page, a flicker of unease coursing through her. In that moment, she realized the connection between the wrenching emotions of her past and the inescapable truths of her present. The figure she had uncovered was not merely an echo, it was a living testament to her mother's choices, a legacy yet to be confronted. With every detail she digested, Clara felt the urgency to dissect her truth, piece by agonizing piece. She glanced at Mrs. Wellington, whose unwavering gaze seemed to bore into Clara's very soul. What did Mrs. Wellington know about this name? Would she offer insights that could further illuminate Clara's path or entangle her in more shadows? Clara's focus sharpened, an unexpected resolve anchoring her thoughts. "I need to know everything about this person," Clara asserted, her voice firmer than she felt. "The connections to my mother, the implications of their actions. There's no room for half-truths anymore." "Ah, fire in your spirit," Mrs. Wellington remarked, the corners of her mouth quirking slightly. "But remember, the more you pry, the more precarious your situation may become. Are you ready for that?" The question hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Clara took a breath, tasting the metallic tang of determination. Yes, she realized, This was not just about bridging the gap between her past and present. It was about defining her future, carving out a space where she could exist without the weight of her mother's shadows suffocating her potential. As she turned her attention back to the file, a series of emails caught her eye. They were dated years apart and spoke of meetings under cover of darkness, encoded messages, and vague discussions of the final stand. Each line felt like an unraveling thread, each signature pointing to entangled loyalties that demanded attention. Clara sensed that behind each of these communications lay buried fears, betrayals, and perhaps even stark regrets. But would understanding make her stronger, or was it merely a siren song pulling her closer to a dangerous whirlpool? "Clara," Mrs. Wellington interrupted her thoughts, "you must decide what you seek in this expedition. The truth can both liberate and endanger." Her words stung, a reminder of what lay at risk. Clara's thoughts drifted to her own ambition, the drive that compelled her to unearth her mother's life, not just as a quest for answers, but as a measure of the woman she aspired to be. Was she ready to confront the moral complexities and ethical ambiguities her mother had navigated? Was she prepared to hold the mirror up not just to her mother's choices but to her own? With renewed focus, Clara started to extract vital snippets from the correspondence. Each revelation was like a piece of a puzzle. With each discovery, Clara glimpsed the stark contrast between her mother's carefully curated image and the tumultuous reality that lay beneath. Clara could feel her identity shifting, a kaleidoscope of possibilities emerging from the jagged fractures of her lineage. The deeper she delved, the more muddled her emotions became. There were moments of dread as she learned about betrayals, but also sparks of empathy when she recognized her mother's fierce commitment to her beliefs. The drive to protect those she loved became evident, but at what cost? Was ambition truly worth the moral compromises it often demanded? Hours slipped by, each moment testing Clara's resolve as she layered familiar emotions over the backdrop of her mother's secretive life. But it was the last email, with its forwarding address marked with an ominous urgency, that sent a shiver down her spine. Who were these individuals her mother had dealt with? What lay beyond that name, and how could it potentially redefine everything Clara thought she knew about family loyalty? Clara's heart raced. She would need to confront the person directly connected to this web, a confrontation that could redefine not only her understanding of her heritage, but also the trajectory of her life. Feeling a mixture of fear and determination, she prepared herself mentally for the confrontation ahead. If she confronted this figure, she could unearth hidden truths and perhaps redefine her own identity in the process. But she also knew it would lay bare the very foundations of her beliefs about loyalty and moral integrity. Taking a breath, she closed the file with purpose. The next steps weren't just part of the investigation, they were Clara's initiation into a new chapter of her life, a life defined by choice and agency rather than by inherited shadows. Yet as she contemplated reaching out to this pivotal figure, she couldn't shake the sensation that she was stepping onto a battlefield of personal reckoning. Who would emerge victorious at the end of this internal struggle, her mother's legacy, or her own burgeoning identity? Clara clenched her fists, summoning her courage for what lay ahead. The moment of clarity approached as she prepared to confront the truth. The shadows of the past stirred restlessly, but Clara was done being a mere bystander in her own life. With one final look at the file, she realized the journey had just begun. Would she rise with the strength of her ancestral ties, or would she be drowned by the weight of expectation? The stakes could not be higher as Clara stepped into the light. Her future was poised on the edge of confrontation that would redefine everything. The morning sun filtered through Clara's window, illuminating the room in a warm glow that felt almost foreign. She had barely slept, her mind racing with the implications of where her investigations had taken her. Sitting at her desk, the file lay open before her like a final exam she was not prepared to ace. The weight of her ambitions clashed with trepidation, creating a torturous tension in her chest. Her resolve of the previous evening felt fragile under the light of day. She had crafted a tentative plan to reach out to the individual tied to her mother. The thought both invigorated and terrified her. Part of Clara craved clarity, the kind that only confrontation could provide, while another part nagged at her to retreat into the safety of silence. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until her finger hovered over the one name that seemed to pulse with significance, the forwarding address from the last email. Taking a deep breath to steady her trembling hands, she typed out a message. But doubts began to swirl in her mind, clouding her intentions. What if this confrontation not only unveiled hidden truths, but also irrevocably altered her world? Clara shook her head, pushing aside the unsettling queries. She was already in too deep. Half measures would only leave her more confused. With a sudden burst of determination, she hit send. Time stretched agonizingly as she stared at the screen, waiting for a response that would either shatter her reality or reinforce it. As she waited, she reflected on her progress thus far. The relentless excavation of her mother's life had unearthed not just familial connections, but had led Clara to confront her own values, her ambitions, her fears, her sense of identity. She realized that understanding her mother did not simply involve deciphering the past. It required her to engage with her own present. Clara was not just digging into her mother's history, she was unearthing the layers of herself buried beneath expectations and shadows. The beep of her phone interrupted her thoughts. She darted to the screen, heart pounding in her chest, as she read the message from the individual. It was brief but charged with implication. They wanted to meet. Tomorrow at noon, the old barn on Miller Road. There was no time for hesitation now, only a surge of adrenaline fluttering within her. The location struck an odd chord within her, a space imbued with memories both comforting and unsettling from her childhood. The barn was a remnant of simpler times, yet now it represented a crucible where her past, her mother's past, and her future would converge. Clara felt a rush of adrenaline. She could no longer retreat into shadows. The meeting would force an unpacking of voices long stifled. She prepared a list of questions, trying to impose structure amidst the chaos swirling within her. What had her mother sacrificed? What were the implications of her choices? Each question dug deeper, revealing not only the desire for understanding, but also a hunger for empowerment. Clara could feel her confidence beginning to crystallize. It was time to break chains. That night, Clara tossed and turned, plagued by visions of the upcoming confrontation. She imagined everything from painful revelations to newfound connections. Each possibility ran rampant through her mind, a ball of conflicting emotions that refused to settle. Would she have the strength to stand her ground, or would she be swept away by the force of her mother's legacy? The morning sun rose anew, marking the day of reckoning. Clara meticulously prepared herself, dressing not just to face her mother's history, but to reclaim her own identity. As she slipped on her jacket, she felt a flicker of hope surging within her. Perhaps, she thought, confronting the harried contours of her heritage might lead to the freedom she sought. She grabbed her keys and stepped outside, the chill of the morning air sending a shiver down her spine. She was making a choice to act, to confront and challenge. As she approached the barn, the looming structure felt less like a cage and more like a gateway to freedom. The moment was upon her, and with each step she took, Clara understood that she was stepping into a transformative crucible, one that would shape her destiny. But as she neared the barn, a shadow flickered just beyond her line of sight, and a deep sense of foreboding enveloped her. What truth lay within that barn? Clara paused, breath catching. The journey was about to reach a pivotal threshold, and she was about to discover just how far her mother's choices had cast their long shadow over her life. Would the revelations inside solidify her emergence into a stronger self, or would they shatter her into pieces? With her heart pounding, she approached the door, uncertain of what awaited her. Clara hesitated for a moment outside the barn, caught in the balance between the past and the future. She had come so far, internalizing lessons from every revelation, and now it was time to confront the source of her mother's legacy. There was a weight hanging in the air, thick with anticipation. As she stepped through the creaky door, her heart raced, but a resolute calm enveloped her. Inside, the dust motes danced in the slanting light, illuminating the familiar surroundings that had once felt so comforting. The scent of aged wood and hay invoked a nostalgia intertwined with her mother's vigor. She squared her shoulders, breathing in deeply as she took her first steps into the transformed space. The individual stood with their back to her, the air thick with tension that simply couldn't be ignored. Clara felt an acute awareness of the significance of this moment. With a clearing of her throat, she called out, "I came to speak about my mother." The figure turned, revealing an aging face marked with lines of knowledge and weariness, eyes reflecting complexities buried deep in shared history. "Clara," they said, their voice steeped in recognition. "I've been expecting you." The two exchanged a measured silence before Clara steadied herself. "I need to understand. I've uncovered letters, emails, but I want to hear it from you. What really happened?" The weight of the past hung heavy in the air, and Clara felt the grounded strength she had sought for so long. Every step of her journey had led to this moment, a confrontation not merely with another person, but with the tangled legacy of her mother's choices. The individual's expression softened, a hint of reluctance flitting across their features. "Your mother was determined, passionate. She fought not just to uphold her values, but to uncover the corruption that seeped into this town like poison." Their words dripped with a bittersweet truth, layered with backgrounds and allegiances that traversed decades. But she also played a dangerous game that forced others into positions they were not prepared for. The stakes were high, higher than anyone realized. Clara's heart raced as she absorbed the revelations unfolding before her. "You're saying she was reckless?" "No, not reckless," they corrected gently. "Ambitious perhaps in ways that obscured the moral lines she once stood by. She sought justice but made choices that complicated the relationships around her, sowing distrust in her wake." This was complexity personified, shades of gray that Clara had battled against for so long, the truth that demanded to be unraveled. The conversation spiraled from there, each revelation unraveling hidden motives and alliances that shaped the landscape of Clara's childhood. The connections were deeper than she had imagined. They sparked realization over who she was becoming and the power she had to redefine her own narrative. Clara felt emboldened as she connected the dots, drawing strength from her mother's mistakes. "I want to reshape this legacy. I refuse to let it drown me. I'll reclaim my identity and my mother's true story." The response was a wise nod, their gaze steady, a flicker of admiration reigning true. "That will be your path forward, but it comes with a price. It will take courage, determination, and a relentless commitment to uphold the truth." Clara stood a little taller, recognizing her undeniable evolution through this journey. She was no longer just fighting against Mrs. Wellington or a quaint town's misgivings, but was forging her own identity, one anchored in integrity and empowerment. With every word exchanged, Clara felt her self-awareness grow, her satisfaction blossoming like the trusted bloom she tended to in her mother's garden. This wasn't merely about unveiling the layers of her mother. It was about claiming her right to write her own story. It was an exhilarating thought. As she exited the barn into the golden light of the afternoon sun, Clara sensed the weight of her mother's past resting easy on her shoulders, not an anchor, but a foundation from which she could spring forth. She had achieved clarity, struggled through the murky depths of uncertainty, and emerged with a profound understanding of herself. No longer confined by perceptions or fears, Clara stood with a solid confidence, ready to reclaim her family's legacy while establishing her own place in this world. She could now engage with shadows from her past in light, revealing truths not as burdens but as stepping stones. Clara felt truly accomplished, her journey filled with growth and realization. She was a testament to resilience and strength. This transformation marked not just an end, but a beginning. And she knew, whatever awaited her in the future, she would face with unshakable conviction. This moment was not the last encounter with her mother's legacy. It was a beautifully wrought beginning. Clara's heart swelled with pride. She had proven herself, and now it was time to embrace her life with authenticity, grounded in purpose and armed with her truth. And so, she stepped forward, ready to rewrite not just her story, but contribute to the tapestry of her community by standing firm in her values. It was an empowering realization. This was how she would navigate the intertwining of her past and future, with an unwavering commitment to authenticity. Now was the moment to transform her life, her story. But first, she needed your support. Subscribe immediately to our channel so you won't miss the next powerful emotional journeys. Leave a like now to nourish the algorithm. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Clara's incredible transformation. Share instantly this story with at least 5 friends who need to witness how one person conquered their fears to find their true self. You need to support the channel now. Don't wait even one more second to share this empowering conclusion.